There is so much going on in the political space as Labour throw about new ideas that have Britons fuming and affected. Now, Rachel Reeves has came out and made a catastrophic admission in a morning Labour meeting and has claimed things are about to get a lot worse within the UK following the decision to cut the winter fuel allowance. I mean, how can it get any worse? Well, let's dive into the details and discuss what Rachel Reeves has said, whilst also going over some of the main headlines from up and down the country. But first, hit the like and subscribe button for more. Rachel Reeves has warned Labour Party backbenchers and cabinet ministers there are more difficult decisions to come at a packed meeting in Parliament to discuss the controversial axing of the unmeans-tested winter fuel payment. The Chancellor told the meeting, attended by Cabinet Ministers Yvette Cooper, John Healey and Steve Reid, to expect more controversial decisions, taken to mean tax hikes and spending cuts. British Stand understands that Reeves was pressed at the meeting to adjust the threshold when pension credit is paid to ensure that more people can benefit. However, otherwise, the meeting passed off peacefully with no hostile attacks from any MP on the policy. No tweaking of the system will be announced before MPs vote on the cut just after lunchtime. Reeves's spokesman said there were no plans for further midgetations relating to this. The comments came as Labour MP Richard Burgon told LBC that some of his constituents will die as a result of the cut to winter fuel payments, adding, "These cuts will result in the deaths of pensioners who won't be able to turn the heating on." In opening remarks, which were circulated by her aides, Reeves told the meeting, "There are more difficult decisions to come. I don't say that because I relish it. I don't, but it is a reflection of the inheritance that we face. So, when members are looking at where to apportion blame, when pensioners are looking where to apportion blame, I tell you where the blame lies. It lies with the Conservatives and the reckless decisions that they made. I don't say that because I relish it. I don't, but it is a reflection of the inheritance that we face." Her spokesman later said that her comments about more difficult decisions related to spending, welfare and tax, and echoed comments she made in July in the Commons, adding that those decisions will be taken at the budget. At her meeting on the Commons Committee corridor, Reeves added, "I understand the decision that this government have made on winter fuel is a difficult decision. I'm not immune to the arguments that many in this room have made. We considered those when the decision was made." She added, "The new state pension has risen by £900 compared with a year ago. That means that pensioners have £900 more in their pockets this year than they did a year ago. Tomorrow, we get data for earnings growth, which will inform the increase in the pension next year. We are protecting the triple lock, not just for this year, but for the duration of this Parliament." In a call for unity, she added, "We stand, we lead, and we govern together." Reeves said that the Treasury was working hard to ensure that all those pensioners who are entitled to pension credit get it. "We're making inroads in reaching the 800,000 people who the Tories allowed to go without pension credit, even knowing that they were entitled to it. And we're bringing forward the merger of housing benefit and pension credit to ensure that more pensioners get the support that they are entitled to. It is the right thing to do, to target money at a time when finances are so stretched, at people who need them most." Asked after the meeting if any single MP had suggested changes to the policy, her spokesman said there was very strong support for Rachel. Asked if the Cabinet was on side with the policy to remove the benefit from so many pensioners, her spokesman added, "Yes. This decision was taken in July. It was a decision taken at Cabinet. What are your thoughts on this? Let me know in the comments." In other news, a review commissioned into the NHS has urged Starmer to spend billions on hospital buildings, in spite of a looming £800 million raid on infrastructure budgets. Former Labour Health Minister Lord Darzi of Denham is set to publish a report on Thursday documenting the problems facing the health service, with Sir Keir Starmer branding the assessment raw and honest. The Prime Minister said the much-anticipated review showed that the state of the NHS was unforgivable, though whilst the health service was broken, it was not beaten. The independent investigation has scrutinised patient access to care, the quality of care provided, and the overall performance of the NHS. Darzi's review will conclude that 50 years of heart disease progress has regressed, as care standards have slipped due to longer wait times in hospitals. He will say, once adjusted for age, the cardiovascular disease mortality rate for people aged under 75 dropped significantly between 2001 and 2010. But improvements have stalled since then, and the mortality rate started rising again during the COVID-19 pandemic. Darzi is also expected to urge the Treasury to fund the construction of new hospitals across the country, stating that Britain has historically spent far less on medical equipment and buildings than other nations. Analysis by the NHS Confederation has found that since 2010, the NHS has spent between £3 billion to £4 billion a year less on infrastructure than other Western European countries, with a cumulative cap of £33 billion in the years before the pandemic. In comparison to other Western countries, since 2010, the NHS has spent between £3 billion to £4 billion a year less. Despite the review urging for more money to be poured into the construction of new buildings, as well as improving the NHS as a whole, £800 million is expected to be taken from the healthcare system's capital funds to cover a black hole in the books. The Chancellor has previously slammed the last Conservative government for leaving a £22 billion black hole in the public finances. Wes Streeting has said he will utilise the review to urge Rachel Reeves to give a boost to the NHS in next year's spending review. He told LBC, "We keep on, year after year, raiding the capital budgets for bricks and mortar, new hospitals, clinics, all the rest of it, and the tech budget, because day-to-day spending splurges out of control, and I'm determined to break that cycle." Discussing the review, Starmer said, "If there's one thing this country knows, it's the last government broke the NHS. Our job now, through Lord Darzi, is to properly understand how that came about and bring about the reforms." Victims of domestic abuse are facing sleepless nights ahead of Labour's early prison release scheme, the Domestic Abuse Commissioner has said. Around 1,700 prisoners will be freed from jail tomorrow when the new scheme comes into effect, and a senior insider has revealed that a high proportion of them will be domestic abusers. In an attempt to tackle overcrowding in prisons, the government's SDS 40 programme could see inmates who have served between 40 to 45% of their prison time released early. Currently, inmates have to serve 50% of their sentences before they can be released. Nicole Jacobs, the Domestic Abuse Commissioner, has warned that some victims may not be aware that their attackers could soon be released. This is due to them not being eligible for victim notification schemes, and this could put in danger. Speaking to the Sunday Times, she said, "We must ensure that victims aren't lost in the shuffle of the changes that are being made in the prison release schemes and the perception of justice and fairness. Victims of domestic abuse are very focused on those release dates. It causes them sleepless nights. They will change so much of their daily activities, knowing that their perpetrator is being released. The uncertainty of not knowing if that person will comply with licensing conditions and of release. This is incredibly stressful in the normal situation, so for those dates to change unexpectedly, or without them knowing, that is a huge consequence for them to pay. The number of prisoners to be released tomorrow is almost double the number that are normally freed from jail in a whole week. The scheme was announced back in July by Justice Secretary Shabana Mahmood in a bid to reduce overcrowding. It was first declared 8 weeks ago, in order to give the probation service enough time to prepare. Mahmood said they are seeking to limit the number of domestic abusers being released under the scheme by excluding prisoners serving sentences for crimes such as non-fatal strangulation, coercive control, stalking, harassment, or breach of a restraining or non-molestation order. Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer also insisted on Saturday there were safeguards in place to prevent high-risk prisoners, including those convicted of domestic violence-related offences, being released. He added, "We are doing everything we can to make sure that high-risk and domestic abusers, domestic violence cases are not released. However, there is nothing in place to stop abusers being released who were convicted of offences not related to domestic violence." A senior government source told The Times, "A high proportion will be domestic abusers." The prison population has now reached a new record high of 88,521 people. A third of all offenders supervised by the probation service are current or previous perpetrators of domestic abuse. What are your thoughts on what we discussed in today's video? Let me know down in the comment section below. If you've not yet already, make sure you do drop a like on this video and subscribe to the channel for more British content. Thank you. Take care. Goodbye.